Picture this. You're a young soldier, alone, on guard duty, in a remote mountain barracks. It's late, the wind is howling outside, and you're feeling that familiar prickle of unease. Suddenly, right there on the parade ground, a group of soldiers appears, seemingly out of thin air.
Oh, that's spooky.
They're in formation,
Yeah.
just like your comrades, but here's the chilling part. You're the only one stationed at the barracks.
That clash between the familiar and the unknown, it can be incredibly unsettling. Your soldier is in his comfort zone, a military facility, yet he's confronted with something that it defies logic. It's this jarring sensation, this feeling that something is deeply wrong. That forms the bedrock of our deep dive today.
So we're about to take a deep dive into the alleged haunting of the Cerler barracks.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of this. This one's good.
Nestled high in the Spanish Pyrenees, this military facility has a tragic past that some say continues to reverberate within its walls. We've got firsthand accounts, official reports, and even whispers of paranormal investigations to unpack.
And it's not just spooky stories. We're talking documented experiences of unexplained phenomena reported by soldiers, journalists, even paranormal investigators. This case sent ripples through the Spanish military, and today we're going to examine why.
Okay, so let's rewind the clock. It all started back on March 11th, 1991, on the slopes of Tucablanca, a peak near the barracks. A group of young soldiers were on a high-altitude training exercise, really pushing their limits, and that's when disaster struck.
An enormous avalanche, described by one witness as a tongue of snow, roared down the mountain, engulfing 9 men. We have a first-hand account from the sole survivor, a soldier named David, who barely escaped. And he talks about an eerie silence hanging in the air that day, almost as if the mountain itself knew what was coming.
It's hard to even imagine the terror those men must have felt. But this isn't just a story about a natural disaster. This is where grief takes a very unexpected and unsettling turn.
In the months after the avalanche, strange and increasingly disturbing events began to plague the Cerler barracks, specifically the building where the deceased soldiers' bodies were being kept.
Oh, wow. So they brought the bodies of the soldiers who died in the avalanche back to the barracks.
That's right. Objects moved on their own. Dishes crashed. Doors slammed shut, even swung open without explanation. There's one account of a heavy bullet casing flying across a room.
So we're already venturing into what, poltergeist territory? Moving objects, that's classic haunting 101. But it sounds like things at the Cerler barracks escalated pretty quickly.
They did. Soldiers started reporting disembodied sounds, footsteps echoing in empty hallways, doors creaking open and slamming shut, the kind of stuff that would make your hair stand on end, even in broad daylight. But there's one detail in the accounts that is particularly chilling. The sound of Kemet boots.
Kemet boots. What's so special about them?
Well, they're these specialized heavy-duty mountain boots worn by the soldiers, not your everyday footwear. And the sound they made, this distinct heavy clomping, was reportedly heard throughout the barracks, even when no one wearing them was around.
Okay, now that's just creepy. It's like whoever or whatever was behind this wanted everyone to know they were there to keep the soldiers on edge. You think that's a fair assessment?
It's certainly a possibility, but it didn't stop at just sounds. Soldiers began reporting shadowy figures darting out of sight, usually glimpsed out of the corner of their eye. And here's the really unsettling part. They were often described as being dressed in full military uniform, sometimes even the specific gear worn during that fateful mountain exercise. Those distinctive caps kept popping up in the reports.
Hold on. Are you saying these soldiers were seeing apparitions of their dead comrades? Talk about psychological warfare. Imagine being haunted by the very people you trained with, joked with, maybe even relied on for your life at some point.
You're hitting on a crucial aspect here, the psychological impact. These soldiers were already carrying the weight of their loss. Add to that sleep deprivation from these nightly disturbances, the isolation of their remote location. It's a recipe for serious mental strain.
Absolutely. Some of our sources mention soldiers becoming so terrified they'd avoid being alone, even clinging to the walls for comfort during guard duty.
And this wasn't just a case of a few jumpy recruits, even seasoned officers were shaken. It got to the point where the military had to intervene.
And this is where it gets really interesting because they didn't just bring in a therapist or something. We're talking next level intervention here. They called in, wait for it, paranormal investigators.
Yes. And not just any paranormal investigators, mind you.
Yeah.
These were experts who had supposedly worked on high-profile, sensitive cases, people who were accustomed to dealing with the inexplicable.
Wow. So the military wasn't brushing this off as mountain madness or ghost stories. They were taking it seriously. Didn't they even bring in a priest at some point?
That's right. We have reports of a priest performing blessings, trying to cleanse the barracks of whatever dark energy might be lingering there. But it seems even that wasn't enough to stop it. Some of the soldiers, desperate for answers, took matters into their own hands.
You mean the Ouija boards and seances?
Exactly. Imagine those young men huddled in the dimly lit barracks, trying to reach out to their fallen friends, searching for explanations, apologies, anything to make sense of the horrors that unfolded on that mountain.
It's heartbreaking. You can practically feel the desperation in their actions. But here's the million-dollar question. If if the military was taking this seriously enough to call in specialists, why the wall of silence?
Ah, that's the real mystery, isn't it? Several sources reported higher-ranking officials instructing soldiers to keep quiet about the events. The the official line focused entirely on the soldiers' psychological well-being, never even addressing the possibility of paranormal activity.
So we're left with this strange contradiction. The military bringing in specialists,
Yeah.
acknowledging something unexplained is happening, but then shutting down any conversation about it, it just doesn't add up.
And that's where we enter the realm of speculation. You see, with a case like the Cerler barracks, there are far more questions than answers. It really makes you think about what it means for a place to be considered truly haunted.
All right, so let's dive into those lingering questions. We've got a remote mountain barracks, a devastating avalanche, and reports of these bizarre incidents. On the surface, it's easy to jump to the conclusion that this is a classic ghost story, right? The spirits of those lost soldiers unable to find peace.
It's a compelling narrative for sure. The idea that the sheer emotional intensity of that day, the grief, the terror, maybe even the soldiers' last thoughts, all of it somehow imprinted onto the very fabric of that place. Some researchers call this a residual haunting. It's like an echo of the past, still resonating in the present. Think about a time you walked into a room after a huge argument. You could practically cut the tension with a knife, right? Some believe it's like that, but on a much grander, more tragic scale.
So instead of just voices echoing in the hallway, we're talking about entire events, emotions, maybe even snippets of those soldiers' final moments, all somehow embedded in the Cerler barracks.
Exactly. And if we entertain that possibility, it raises even more questions. Are these just echoes, these occurrences, or is there something more deliberate going on? Are these potential spirits trying to reach out, to communicate, maybe even to warn the living?
But then there's the psychological aspect.
Yeah.
We know that suggestion is a powerful force, especially in high stress environments like a military facility.
Mm.
Could this all just be a case of mass hysteria, fueled by the tragedy, the isolation of their environment, all those nights spent in a dark and creaky old building?
The human mind is a fascinating and sometimes frightening thing. It's very possible that the soldiers, already vulnerable because of the trauma they'd experienced, became hypersuggestible. They're on edge. Their imaginations are working overtime. And soon even the most ordinary sound takes on a sinister quality. Fear feeds fear. And suddenly, what started as a few isolated incidents snowballs into a full-blown, well, haunting, for lack of a better term.
That makes sense. But what about the physical phenomena reported at the barracks? Moving objects, the sound of those Camet boots. Those details seem a little harder to explain away as just figments of imagination, don't they?
That's where we have to consider all the possibilities, even the unsettling ones. What if this isn't just a haunting, but something far more calculated? Some of the accounts we looked at hinted at something darker, something
Well,
deliberate.
Are you talking about a real life MK Ultra situation,
Yeah.
using these soldiers as unwitting test subjects in some sort of twisted experiment?
It's definitely a chilling thought, but history is full of examples of governments, especially military branches, conducting unethical experiments. And when you consider the efforts to silence the soldiers at Cerler Barracks, it does make you wonder if someone was trying to bury something more than just a few ghost stories.
So where does that leave us? We've
Yeah.
got potential residual hauntings, mass hysteria, secret government experiments. It's like trying to assemble a puzzle where half the pieces are missing.
That's the nature of these deep dives. We may never have definitive proof, but by examining the information available, weighing the evidence, and approaching these accounts with open but critical minds, we can form our own conclusions. What matters is that we keep asking questions.
Absolutely. In a way, piecing together the fragments of a mystery like this, even without a neat resolution, tells us something about ourselves. It makes us think about the power of trauma, how we perceive the world around us, and the mysteries that lie hidden within the human mind. And hey, even if it turns out to be an elaborate prank or some explainable phenomena, it definitely makes you think twice the next time you hear a floorboard creak in an empty
Oh,
hallway,
yeah.
doesn't it?
It certainly does. The line between the known and unknown is often blurry, and sometimes the most unsettling mysteries are the ones that hit closest to home.
And there you have it, another deep dive completed. But the exploration doesn't end here. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What resonates with you most about the Cerler Barracks mystery? Do you think it's a case of a haunting, mass hysteria, or something even more unsettling? Head over to our website and share your theories. Until next time, keep exploring the unexplained.